Picture this. You're taking an evening walk through your neighborhood in Fort Collins, Colorado. The sun is setting, painting the sky orange and pink. You spot something moving in the bushes near your mailbox. A rabbit. But wait, something's wrong. Horrifically wrong. This isn't Bugs Bunny hopping through your yard. This creature looks like it crawled straight out of a nightmare. Black, twisted horns and tentacles are jutting out from its face, from its head, writhing like something alive. Your blood runs cold. You blink hard, thinking you must be seeing things. But no, it's real. It's right there in front of you. What in God's name are you looking at? Has nature gone mad? Are we living in the end times? Are these creatures dangerous? Can they infect you, your kids, your pets? And most terrifying of all, why are experts now warning people across America that these Frankenstein rabbits are spreading, and whatever you do, do not get close to them? If you're new here, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind, and you're going to want to stay updated on stories like this that the mainstream media isn't covering the way they should. Let me take you back to August 2025. Fort Collins, Colorado. A quiet college town nestled against the Rocky Mountains. Population around 170,000. Known for craft breweries, outdoor recreation, and Colorado State University. Not exactly the place you'd expect a biological horror show to unfold. But that's exactly what happened. Local residents started posting photos and videos on social media. TikTok, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. The images were disturbing. Rabbits, cute fluffy cottontails that normally look like they belong on an Easter card, now sporting grotesque black protrusions from their heads and faces. Some looked like horns. Others resembled tentacles or spikes. Thick, dark, keratinized growths that made these animals look like something out of a David Cronenberg body horror film. One Fort Collins resident, Susan Mansfield, told the local news station iNews that she saw a rabbit with what looked like black quills or black toothpicks sticking out all around its mouth. Another person described seeing growths that looked like a scabby mess covering the rabbit's entire face. Within days, these posts went absolutely viral. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of likes. People were calling them demon rabbits, zombie rabbits, Frankenstein bunnies. The comments sections exploded with panic and speculation. Was this some new disease? A mutation from radiation? Chemical contamination in the water? An alien virus? Was this the beginning of a pandemic that could jump to humans? Social media did what social media does best. It freaked out. One post on X racked up over 1 million views claiming that experts were warning about infected Frankenstein rabbits with tentacles invading the United States. Instagram posts about the phenomenon were liked nearly 100,000 times. Facebook posts got tens of thousands of reactions. The fear was real, people. And honestly, when you look at these images, you can understand why. These animals look genuinely terrifying. They look wrong. They look like nature made a mistake. Like some mad scientist spliced rabbit DNA with something from the ocean floor. But here's the thing. This isn't new. This isn't an invasion. This isn't some exotic disease from a foreign land. And it's definitely not the apocalypse. What's happening to these rabbits is a condition that's been documented in North America for over 90 years. Let me explain. The virus responsible for these horrifying growths is called the Shope papillomavirus, also known as cottontail rabbit papillomavirus, or CRPV for short. It's named after Dr. Richard Edwin Shope, an American virologist who discovered it way back in 1933. Nearly a century ago. Dr. Shope was working at the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in Princeton, New Jersey. He was already making waves in the scientific community. Earlier in 1931, working with his mentor Paul Lewis, Shope had identified influenza virus A in pigs. That discovery helped other researchers in England culture the same virus from humans in 1933, eventually identifying it as the virus that caused the devastating 1918 flu pandemic. The guy was a legitimate virus hunter, one of the best of his generation. But in the early 1930s, Shope's attention turned to something strange that hunters in Iowa and Kansas kept reporting. They were shooting wild cottontail rabbits that had bizarre horn-like protrusions growing out of their heads, faces, and necks. These weren't antlers. They weren't bone. They were these weird, dark, crusty growths. Some small like little nubs. Others several inches long, branching out like twisted black fingers. The hunters didn't know what to make of it. Was it some kind of fungal infection? A parasite? Nobody knew. So Shope decided to investigate. He collected samples from infected rabbits. He examined the tissue under microscopes. He conducted experiments. And what he discovered changed the course of medical science forever. Shope determined that these horn-like growths were keratinous carcinomas, basically tumors made of the same protein that forms your fingernails and hair, caused by a virus. He was able to isolate virus particles from the tumors on wild rabbits and use them to inoculate domestic rabbits. Those domestic rabbits then developed similar tumors. This was groundbreaking, people. Absolutely groundbreaking. Because this was the first time anyone had definitively proven that a virus could cause cancer in mammals. The first time. Before Shope's work, the connection between viruses and cancer was theoretical, debated, uncertain. Shope made it real. He provided the first mammalian model of virus-caused cancer. His research laid the foundation for everything we now understand about viral oncology, the study of cancer-causing viruses. A few years later, another researcher named Peyton Rouse built on Shope's work and demonstrated in more detail how the virus could transform normal cells into cancerous ones. This research eventually contributed to our understanding of human papillomavirus, HPV, which causes cervical cancer, throat cancer, and other cancers in humans. In fact, the HPV vaccine that's now recommended for teenagers and young adults, the vaccine that prevents cervical cancer, was developed using research that incorporated the cottontail rabbit papillomavirus as a model. The rabbit virus became what scientists call the gold standard model for studying human papillomaviruses. Without those horned rabbits in Iowa, without Dr. Shope's curiosity and determination, we might not have the life-saving HPV vaccines we have today. Those creepy-looking rabbits literally helped save millions of human lives. Think about that for a second. Now, let's talk about what this virus actually does. How does it work? How does a rabbit go from being a normal, adorable cottontail to looking like something from a horror movie? The Shope papillomavirus is transmitted primarily by biting insects. Mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. These insects bite an infected rabbit, pick up viral particles on their mouthparts, then bite a healthy rabbit and mechanically transfer the virus. It's not like the virus replicates inside the insect. The insect is just a dirty needle, basically carrying contaminated biological material from one host to another. That's why you see more infections during the warmer months, late spring through early fall, when insect populations are at their peak. In winter, when mosquitoes and ticks are dormant or dead, new infections drop dramatically. Once the virus enters a rabbit's skin through the bite wound, infects the epithelial cells, the cells that form the outer layer of skin. The virus hijacks these cells, inserting its own genetic material into the cell's DNA. This causes the cells to grow abnormally, forming papillomas, which are essentially warts. At first, these papillomas appear as small red bumps, just tiny raised spots on the rabbit's skin. But over time, weeks and months, these bumps grow. They develop into larger wart-like structures, and then they keratinize. They harden. The protein keratin builds up layer upon layer, creating these thick, dark, horn-like or tentacle-like protrusions. They're typically black or very dark brown because of the concentration of keratin and melanin. The growths usually appear on the rabbit's head, neck, ears, and sometimes around the mouth and eyes. In some cases, they can appear on other parts of the body too, the shoulders, the abdomen, even near the tail. The location matters a lot for the rabbit's survival. If the growths are on the top of the head or the back, they're mostly just cosmetic. The rabbit can still see, still eat, still drink, still function normally. But if the growths appear around the eyes, they can obstruct vision. If they grow around the mouth, they can interfere with the rabbit's ability to eat. A rabbit that can't eat will starve. That's how the virus kills when it does kill. Not through systemic infection, not through organ failure, but through starvation caused by physical obstruction. In wild cottontail rabbits, the natural host of the virus, most infections are actually self-limiting. The rabbit's immune system eventually kicks in, recognizes the virus, and starts fighting back. The papillomas stop growing. They may even regress, shrinking and eventually falling off. The rabbit recovers and develops immunity. It won't get infected again. This happens in the majority of cases in wild rabbits. They live out their lives just fine. But in domestic rabbits, rabbits you'd keep as pets, the story is different. More ominous. In domestic rabbits, the virus is much more aggressive. Studies have shown that about 75% of infected domestic rabbits will see their papillomas transform into malignant squamous cell carcinomas. That's skin cancer. Aggressive, spreading, deadly skin cancer. The tumors can metastasize, spreading to the lymph nodes, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys. Why the difference between wild and domestic rabbits? Scientists aren't entirely sure, but they think it has to do with genetics and immune system differences. Domestic rabbits have been bred for specific traits, temperament, fur color, size, and that selective breeding may have inadvertently weakened their immune response to certain pathogens. Wild cottontails, on the other hand, have been subjected to natural selection for thousands of generations. The ones with weak immune systems died. The ones with strong immune systems survived and reproduced. Evolution in action. Now here's where the debate gets interesting and where we need to separate fact from fiction, science from sensationalism. The social media posts in August 2025 were claiming these rabbits were invading the United States. That experts were issuing urgent warnings. That people should be afraid. Let's break down what's actually true. First, are these infected rabbits spreading across the U.S.? Well, yes and no. The virus isn't new to the United States. It's not invading from somewhere else. The Shope papillomavirus was first discovered in the U.S. It's endemic here, meaning it's always been here, part of the natural ecosystem. It's most common in the Midwest states like Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Colorado, and parts of Texas. That's where Dr. Shope first found it in the 1930s, and that's where it still circulates today. However, individual infected rabbits can and do move around. Rabbits are mobile animals. A cottontail's home range can be anywhere from 2 to 10 acres, sometimes more. They move to find food, to escape predators, to find mates. So an infected rabbit in one neighborhood can easily hop to another neighborhood a mile or two away. That creates the appearance of spreading, but really, the virus has been in these areas all along. It just becomes more visible when there's a local outbreak, when conditions favor transmission. Lots of mosquitoes, lots of ticks, high rabbit density, all those factors together can create surge in infections. That's probably what happened in Fort Collins in 2025. Not an invasion, just an outbreak. Second, are experts warning people not to get close? Yes, absolutely. But not because the virus is dangerous to humans. Let me be crystal clear about this. The Shope papillomavirus cannot infect humans. It is species-specific to rabbits and closely related hares. It cannot jump to humans. It cannot jump to dogs. It cannot jump to cats. It cannot jump to any other mammal. There has never been a single documented case of a human contracting this virus. Not one. Not in the 90-plus years since its discovery. Not from handling infected rabbits. Not from being bitten by mosquitoes or ticks that fed on infected rabbits. It's just not possible. The virus is adapted to rabbit cells. It recognizes rabbit cellular receptors. It integrates with rabbit DNA. Human cells are foreign territory. It can't get in, can't replicate, can't do anything. So why are experts warning people to stay away from these infected rabbits? There are 3 reasons. Number 1, the rabbits may carry other diseases that can infect humans. Tularemia, also called rabbit fever, is a bacterial infection that wild rabbits can carry. It can be transmitted to humans through direct contact with infected animals, through bites from infected ticks, or even through the air if you're skinning or butchering an infected rabbit and inhale bacteria from the tissues. Tularemia is serious. It causes fever, chills, swollen lymph nodes, and without treatment, it can be life-threatening. So even though the papillomavirus itself is harmless to you, the rabbit carrying it might be carrying something else that isn't. Number 2, approaching or trying to handle a wild rabbit is just bad wildlife practice. Wild animals, even sick ones, can bite and scratch when they feel threatened. Rabbit bites can break skin and introduce bacteria that cause infections. Plus, stressing out a wild animal that's already dealing with a viral infection is cruel. It's unnecessary. Leave wildlife alone unless you're a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. And number 3, if you have a pet rabbit at home, you absolutely do not want to bring the virus back to your pet. While the virus can infect you, it can hitch a ride on your clothing, your shoes, your hands. You touch an infected wild rabbit, then you touch your pet rabbit, and boom, you've just introduced a potentially lethal virus to your pet. Now, let's talk about pet rabbits specifically, because this is where rabbit owners need to pay attention. If you keep domestic rabbits, you need to understand that this virus is a serious threat to them. Not to you, but to them. Domestic rabbits can contract the Shope papillomavirus if they're exposed to infected wild rabbits, or if they're bitten by mosquitoes or ticks that have fed on infected wild rabbits. And as I mentioned earlier, in domestic rabbits, the prognosis is much worse. 75% malignant transformation rate. That's a terrifying statistic if you love your pet rabbit. So what can you do to protect them? First, keep your rabbits indoors. This is the single most effective prevention strategy. Rabbits that live inside in a climate-controlled environment are not exposed to wild rabbits and are not exposed to mosquitoes and ticks. Problem solved. If you must keep your rabbits outside, make sure their enclosure is escape-proof and predator-proof with fine mesh screens to keep insects out. Use mosquito netting. Use tick prevention products if your veterinarian recommends them. Second, never let your domestic rabbits have direct contact with wild rabbits. Ever. Even if the wild rabbit looks healthy, it might be carrying the virus in a latent state. Not worth the risk. Third, if you live in an area where the Shope papillomavirus is known to be endemic, which includes most of the Midwest and parts of the Mountain West, talk to your vet about monitoring your rabbits regularly for signs of infection. If your pet rabbit does develop papillomas, what are your options? Well, if caught early, surgical removal is possible. A veterinarian can remove the growths before they become too large or before they transform into cancer. But surgery doesn't cure the viral infection. The virus is still in the rabbit system. The growths can come back. Some veterinarians may recommend more aggressive treatment, including antiviral drugs or immunotherapy, trying to boost the rabbit's immune system to fight off the virus. But honestly, there's no guaranteed cure. Prevention is your best bet. Now, let's circle back to the bigger picture. The connection between these horned rabbits and American folklore. Because this isn't just a biological story. It's a cultural story, too. And it's fascinating. You've probably heard of the jackalope, right? That mythical creature from the American West. A jackrabbit with antlers. It's a staple of roadside tourist traps, gift shops, old Western bars. Mounted jackalope heads on the wall, grinning at you with those big rabbit teeth and those impressive deer antlers. The jackalope is to Wyoming what Bigfoot is to the Pacific Northwest. A beloved cryptid, a local legend, part of the cultural identity. The most common origin story of the jackalope goes back to 1932, Douglas, Wyoming. Two brothers, Douglas and Ralph Herrick, went hunting for jackrabbits. They were teenagers, and they'd learned taxidermy through mail-order courses, which was a thing back then. You could literally learn how to stuff dead animals from correspondence school. Anyway, the Herrick brothers came home from their hunting trip and tossed a dead jackrabbit onto the floor of their taxidermy shop. By sheer coincidence, it landed right next to a pair of deer antlers they'd been working on. The rabbit's head slid up against the antlers, and for a moment, it looked like the rabbit had horns. The brothers stared at it. Then one of them, probably Douglas, said something like, "Let's mount that thing." They grafted the deer antlers onto the jackrabbit's skull and created the first commercial jackalope. They sold it to a local hotel owner for $10, which in 1932 was decent money. The mounted jackalope was displayed in the hotel lobby, and it became an instant hit. Tourists loved it. They took photos. They told their friends. They wanted to buy their own jackalope heads. The Herrick brothers, sensing a business opportunity, started producing more. They made hundreds, then thousands of jackalope mounts over the years. They sold them to hotels, bars, restaurants, gift shops all over the American West. The jackalope became a cultural icon. But here's the twist. The Herrick brothers didn't invent the concept of a horned rabbit. They popularized it, commercialized it, turned it into kitsch, but they didn't invent it. Horned rabbits appear in folklore from all over the world, going back centuries. In Bavaria, there's a creature called the Walperdinger, a rabbit-like animal, with horns and fangs. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, naturalists and artists depicted horned hares in their work. There's a famous painting from 1575 by Joris Hofnagel showing a horned hare. These weren't considered mythical at the time. They were illustrated in scientific texts as real animals. It wasn't until the late 1700s that scientists started rejecting the idea of horned rabbits as a distinct biological species. So where did these old European depictions come from? Almost certainly from real sightings of rabbits infected with papillomavirus. The Shope papillomavirus isn't unique to North America. Related papillomaviruses exist in Europe and Asia too, infecting wild hares and rabbits there. A medieval farmer or hunter encounters a rabbit with horn-like growths on its head. He tells his friends. The story spreads. Someone paints it. Someone writes about it. Over time, it becomes part of the folklore. Fast forward to the 1930s, and the Herrick brothers tap into that same ancient folklore, knowingly or unknowingly, and bring it roaring back to life in the American imagination. But there's an even deeper layer to this. Dr. Richard Shope himself was aware of the old European horned rabbit illustrations. When he was investigating the horn-like growths on cottontail rabbits in the early 1930s, he came across those historical texts and artwork. He realized that what he was seeing in Iowa and Kansas might be the same phenomenon that medieval Europeans had witnessed. That connection between ancient folklore and modern virology is part of what motivated his research. He wasn't just curious about a weird virus. He was solving a centuries-old mystery. And in doing so, he unlocked secrets about cancer that are still saving lives today. Now let's talk about the science in more detail, because this is where it gets really interesting. The Shope papillomavirus is part of a larger family of viruses called papillomaviruses. There are more than 300 different types of papillomaviruses that have been identified so far. More than 200 of them infect humans. They're incredibly diverse. Some cause harmless warts on your hands and feet. Others cause genital warts. And some, the high-risk types like HPV-16 and HPV-18, cause cancer. Cervical cancer, throat cancer, anal cancer, penile cancer, vulvar cancer. Papillomaviruses are responsible for about 5% of all human cancers worldwide. That's millions of cases every year. Understanding how papillomaviruses cause cancer was one of the great challenges of 20th century medicine. And the cottontail rabbit papillomavirus played a critical role in solving that puzzle. Because you can't study human papillomavirus in animals. HPV only infects humans. You can't give it to mice or rats or monkeys and watch what happens. That makes it incredibly difficult to develop treatments and vaccines. You can study the virus in cell cultures in the lab, but that doesn't tell you how it behaves in a living organism, in real tissue, with a real immune system responding to it. That's where the rabbit model comes in. Cottontail rabbit papillomavirus behaves very similarly to high-risk human papillomaviruses. It infects epithelial cells. It integrates into the host genome. It causes benign tumors that can progress to malignant cancer. The timeline is similar. The immune response is similar. The cellular mechanisms are similar. So researchers could use rabbits infected with CRPV as a stand-in for humans infected with HPV. They could test antiviral drugs. They could test vaccines. They could study how the immune system fights the virus. They could experiment with gene therapy and immunotherapy. And all of that research, conducted on rabbits over decades, directly contributed to the development of the HPV vaccines. In 1937, just a few years after discovering the virus, Dr. Shope noticed something important. Rabbits that recovered from a CRPV infection were immune to reinfection. Their immune systems had learned to recognize the virus and destroy it before it could establish a new infection. That was the first clue that a vaccine might be possible. Over the following decades, researchers used the rabbit model to explore different vaccination strategies. They tried using killed virus. They tried using viral proteins. They tried using DNA vaccines. Eventually, they figured out that the most effective approach was to use virus-like particles, VLPs, which are empty shells that look like the virus, but don't contain any viral DNA. The immune system sees these particles, thinks they're the real virus, and mounts a response. Then, if the person or rabbit is ever exposed to the actual virus, the immune system is ready. It attacks immediately and prevents infection. That's how the HPV vaccines work today. Gardasil and Cervarix, the two main HPV vaccines, are based on VLP technology. And that technology was developed and refined using the cottontail rabbit papillomavirus model. The vaccines have been spectacularly successful. In countries with high vaccination rates, cervical cancer rates have plummeted. In Australia, for example, which started a national HPV vaccination program in 2007, cervical cancer is expected to be virtually eliminated as a public health problem within the next couple of decades. We're talking about saving hundreds of thousands of lives every year worldwide. And it all traces back to those horned rabbits in Iowa and the curiosity of a virologist named Richard Shope. All right, so we've covered the history, the science, the folklore. Now, let's address some of the more speculative questions and concerns that people have raised online. One of the big ones, could climate change be making this worse? Are we seeing more infections because of environmental changes? It's a reasonable question. Climate change is affecting disease patterns all over the world. Warmer temperatures are allowing mosquitoes and ticks to expand their ranges farther north and to higher elevations. Longer warm seasons mean longer transmission periods for insect-borne diseases. So could that apply to the Shope papillomavirus too? The honest answer is we don't know for sure. There haven't been large-scale epidemiological studies tracking CRPV infection rates over time in relation to climate variables. But some researchers have speculated that yes, climate change could be playing a role. Dr. Kristen Bernard, a virology professor at the University of Wisconsin School of Veterinary Medicine, told Wisconsin Public Radio in August 2025 that she wouldn't be surprised if climate change is increasing the amount of virus transmission during summer months due to higher insect activity. More mosquitoes, more ticks, more transmission events, more infected rabbits. It makes logical sense. But she also cautioned that there's no strong evidence yet. It's a hypothesis, not a proven fact. What we do know is that sightings of infected rabbits seem to be increasing in some areas, or at least people are noticing them more. Part of that might be genuine ecological change, but part of it is almost certainly just increased awareness, thanks to social media. 30 years ago, if you saw a rabbit with weird growths in your backyard, you might mention it to a neighbor or call animal control, and that would be the end of it. Today, you post a photo on TikTok, and within hours, millions of people have seen it. The visibility is different. The virus itself might not be spreading faster, but our awareness of it is spreading much faster. Another question people have asked, could this virus mutate and become dangerous to humans? Could it jump species? Again, it's a reasonable concern in the age of COVID-19 and emerging infectious diseases. But the answer here is almost certainly no. Papillomaviruses are extremely species-specific. They've co-evolved with their host species for millions of years. The cottontail rabbit papillomavirus is adapted to rabbit cells at a very deep genetic level. The viral proteins are shaped to fit rabbits' cellular receptors. The viral DNA is optimized to integrate with rabbit chromosomes. Making the jump to a completely different species like humans would require so many mutations, so many changes, that it would essentially have to become a different virus entirely. It's theoretically possible in the same way that it's theoretically possible for a monkey to randomly type out the complete works of Shakespeare. But practically speaking, it's not going to happen. What about the possibility of new, unknown viruses emerging in wildlife that could be more dangerous? That's a legitimate concern, and it's one that wildlife disease specialists and public health officials take very seriously. Emerging infectious diseases are a real threat. Most new human diseases come from animals. HIV came from chimpanzees. Ebola comes from bats. COVID-19 almost certainly came from bats through an intermediate host. We need robust surveillance systems to detect new pathogens early before they become pandemics. But the Shope papillomavirus is not that. It's a known virus. It's been studied for 90-plus years. We understand it well. It's not a threat to humans. So what should you actually do if you see one of these Frankenstein rabbits in your neighborhood? Here's the practical advice. Number 1, don't touch it. Don't try to catch it. Don't try to help it. I know it looks pitiful, and your instinct might be to rescue it, but leave it alone. If the rabbit is in distress, unable to hop properly, clearly starving, you can call your local animal control or wildlife rehabilitation center and report it. They can assess whether the animal needs to be humanely euthanized or can be left alone to recover on its own. But don't handle it yourself. Number 2, keep your pets away. If you have a dog that likes to chase rabbits, keep it on a leash or supervise it closely in the yard. If you have an outdoor cat, keep it indoors. You don't want your pets interacting with infected wildlife for multiple reasons. And number 3, if you have pet rabbits, take the precautions I mentioned earlier. Keep them indoors or in insect-proof enclosures. Monitor them for any unusual growths. Talk to your vet. Number 4, if you're a hunter and you shoot a rabbit that has visible papillomas, do not eat it. While the virus itself can't infect you, the tumors can be associated with bacterial infections and other pathogens. Plus, honestly, who wants to eat a tumor-covered rabbit? Just dispose of the carcass properly and move on to the next one. And number 5, don't panic. These rabbits aren't invading. They're not zombie rabbits. They're not demon rabbits. They're just sick animals dealing with a viral infection that's been around for decades. It's sad for the rabbits, but it's not the end of the world. Let me wrap this up by bringing it all back together. What started as viral photos of creepy-looking rabbits in Colorado turned into a massive online panic in August 2025. People saw images that looked unnatural, that looked wrong, and they assumed the worst. That's human nature. We're wired to fear the unknown, to see threats where they might not exist. But the truth, as usual, is more nuanced and more interesting than the panic. These so-called Frankenstein rabbits are suffering from a virus discovered almost a century ago by a brilliant virologist named Richard Shope. That virus helped unlock the secrets of cancer. It helped lead to the development of vaccines that are now saving millions of human lives from cervical cancer and other HPV-related diseases. The horned rabbits of medieval European folklore? Probably infected with related papillomaviruses. The jackalope of American Western legend? Inspired, at least in part, by real rabbits with real viral infections. The virus is not invading the United States. It's been here all along, part of the natural ecosystem. It's not dangerous to humans. It can't infect us. It can't jump species. But it is dangerous to domestic rabbits, so if you have pet rabbits, protect them. And it's a reminder that nature is complex, that diseases are part of a natural world, and that sometimes things that look terrifying are actually just biology doing what biology does. The rabbits with horns and tentacles aren't monsters. They're victims. Victims of a virus that's been cycling through rabbit populations for thousands, maybe millions of years. Most of them will recover. Some won't. That's nature. Red in tooth and claw, or in this case, black in horn and tentacle. But here's the beautiful irony. Those scary-looking rabbits, those creatures that made people recoil in horror when they saw them online, those same rabbits and their ancestors played a crucial role in one of the greatest medical achievements of the 20th and 21st centuries, the development of cancer vaccines. So maybe instead of fearing them, we should appreciate them. Appreciate the sacrifice, however unknowing, that wild rabbits made to advance human medicine. Appreciate the scientists like Richard Shope, who looked at something bizarre and grotesque and saw not a monster, but a question waiting to be answered. And appreciate the complexity and wonder of the natural world, even when it shows us its dark and twisted side. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you learned something, if this made you think, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might find it interesting. Subscribe for more deep dives into the weird, the wonderful, and the misunderstood corners of science and nature. And remember, the next time you see something online that looks apocalyptic, take a breath, do some research, and ask yourself, what's the real story here? Because more often than not, the real story is even more fascinating than the panic. Thanks for watching.